Hi there, my name is Sebastian. I am the founder of Rollout Democracy, a consulting company specialized in political technology. And I'm here today with someone who is very well known in the industry, not only because he's an amazing professional, but also because he's an excellent communicator. Her name is Toni, head of Vice President of European Business Development at NationBuilder. Hello, Toni.
Hi, Sebastian. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. We are doing this interview live from London, from the headquarters of NationBuilder. And the first thing that I would like to do is to ask you about the company, about the product, and why do you think it is the solution of choice of so many political parties, civil organizations across Europe? How do you differentiate from the rest?
Great question. I think the biggest differentiation in terms of the product, it really is this idea of bringing together all of the elements that you need when you're campaigning. And we have a very, I think, different approach to campaigning. For us, it's not something you do just to win an election, just to get elected. That campaigning mindset is something that we believe that you should be in every day of the year. So I think the platform being an all-inclusive, all-serving solution has been something that has gotten a lot of interest. Some of the biggest challenges that we notice when talking with political parties, for example, is this idea of having decentralized or siloed data sets, different teams working in different tools and different products. And that's also from a vertical perspective, but we're also seeing that from top down. So the HQ might be using certain tools, and then at a local level, you're using different tools. So having that idea of having everything on the same tool, so NationBuilder, the 4 key elements that we believe you need when you're running a campaign are your front-facing website that drives people to engage, drives people to take action. You've obviously got the CRM, so the data, who are the people that matter to you the most. You've got the emailing capability, so sending out targeted and tailored emails. And then you've got the finance aspect, which is generally micro donations or membership fees. Being able to have all of that on one platform really does allow for seamless integration, avoids mishaps, avoids you exporting lists of people, putting them back into the system, losing data. So I think the ease of use is one aspect. The social media integrations has also been something that I think here in Europe people are interested in, that idea that we have so many Twitter followers and Facebook fans, but reality is that we don't actually know who these people are. So one of the things that NationBuilder does is try and get a better understanding of who are these people who are following you on Twitter and Facebook, and are these the same people who are members, are these the same people who are your donors? So I think the social media integration aspect has also been big. And then I also like to think that even though the product is great, the support is also on par as well. We've learned a lot of lessons, and we've taken a lot of lessons from the US, and we've brought them across the Atlantic. We've learned from, what works here in Europe, what doesn't, and then what works in the UK might not work in Italy or Spain. So we're still in that learning and growth model, but I think also having the support, having the right people that are your account managers that help you through that process, working with experts such as yourself on integrating these experts within the campaigns, the ecosystem around us, the architects who build for a living websites that drive engagement, drive action. I think all of that combined has made NationBuilder is one of the softwares of choice and the companies of choice.
And there are many things that are exciting that are going on in NationBuilder.
Yeah.
You have a new CEO, a woman.
Yeah.
And so what will that mean for the company and the product?
I mean, Leah is no stranger to NationBuilder. Leah's been, right at the forefront of NationBuilder since the beginning. And it's exciting to see. It's always exciting, I think, when there's a new leader that comes on to see where that takes us and the different styles of leadership. I think one of our biggest priorities is going to be focusing on the product, on our customers, really building up that trust between us and the customers, and making sure that the product, is as good as it can be in the US. And then as we internationalize and go into new markets, also being on top of that, of really understanding what the small tweaks and changes. I mean, it is, in a product like NationBuilder, it's the small differences that you change that make a huge difference. So the small changes that we can make in NationBuilder will allow for our customers to be that much more happy or satisfied with the product. So I think that's going to be a big focus, is just focusing on what the leaders out there need in terms of the software. And I think, you know, the product is as good as its weakest link. So we need to ensure that, you know, whatever that weakest link is, that we make sure we build it up. So I think it's going to be a big focus on that. But time will tell. It's just the beginning. So, but I'm really excited to see where Leah takes all of this. I know she has always a great vision and great plan.
Yeah, and the same the rest of the community here in Europe. We hope to see her soon. So
yes.
We have to make sure you bring her over to London.
Yeah, we've started getting I have a secret dream that we build an exchange program where more of the people from the LA office come and visit us in Europe, because you're right, it is when you're on the ground here in Europe that you understand the differences of culture, the different needs. So I have no doubt that Leah's gonna come down soon. We've just had 2 of our team members from the product side and the engineering side join us as well here all of last week, which is great. We had someone else who was here for 3 weeks. So we're hoping to bring more of our colleagues from LA into London. We're not going to attract them with the weather, that's for sure. So we need to find other things to bribe them to come across.
And Europe is indeed an important market for you. And I wanted to talk about what makes Europe different from the US. What have you seen during the last year in European politics, lessons learned? So what can you tell us about it?
I mean, Europe is undoubtedly a huge market for us. I think it's a huge market in general. It's the largest trading bloc in the world. So it's obviously got our attention. I think the biggest difference is language. Cultural differences, the different types of elections, how elections are run, presidential versus parliamentary system, all of that is key, but the language barrier is the hardest thing. Just because we need to ensure that the product fits the needs of people in different markets. So currently the product is translated in French and in Spanish, and you know, if we are serious about the Nordic regions, if we are serious about Germany, Switzerland, what is it going to take, you know, to translate the product? So I think the language barrier is the actual barrier and the biggest challenge. Most people in the tech community are used to, I think, using software in English, in the language that's not their mother tongue. But I think it's different in politics, especially when you're trying to decentralize the political model and you want to give these complex tools in the hands of local volunteers. The volunteers are not as comfortable in English as people at the HQ at a political party. So I think that is something to take into account, and we're very well aware of that, which is why, you know, currently at the moment, the priority markets for us are markets where the product is already translated. So obviously the UK, France, Belgium, the Brussels bubble as well. We're looking at Switzerland, we're looking at Spain. So we're trying to focus on the markets where we already have the product market fit.
Are they so different, the 2 markets, the US and beyond
the language?
The language, are because here political parties will have more representation systems, so you know, it's not the winner takes all, and therefore that makes it probably less attractive to invest in digital campaign and technology infrastructure, because you know that you are gonna get some representation because your core voters will show up. How has this affected the
interesting. I think the way people address political campaigns is drastically different. That being said, I think we're starting to adopt more and more US-centric tactics here in Europe. And what I mean by that is the biggest change that I've seen is moving away from purely having the right tools and the right software to actually hiring the right people. I mean, we just had this discussion about hiring a data scientist. Most of the political campaigns that you look at today don't yet have a data scientist. They have what they would consider someone that looks after digital, who looks after everything. And that can be the person, I mean, we joked with one of our other experts the other day that he does everything from fixing the fax machine, the phone line, to analyzing data, to setting up software, to building website. And I think that's no longer enough today. So I think the biggest change that we're going to see is people are realizing that software only takes you so far. And this is one of the reasons why we focus so heavily on training and ensuring that we educate people with the tools that they have. So I think hiring the right kind of people is one of the biggest change that we're seeing. But the way campaigns are run, I mean, obviously in the UK is much closer to the US than it is to the rest of Europe when it comes to the campaigning tactics. But I think we're going to see more effort and more conscious decisions based on the type of tools that people build or buy, realizing that they just need to modernize the way they're running political campaigns. The other thing I think that we're seeing is that really stark realization that the importance, and I think we saw this with the Brexit campaign, the true importance of volunteers, the role that they have to play, and then understanding that volunteers are multiple subsets of volunteers, that there's not just one type of volunteer. You can have the people who want to go out canvassing, you can have the people who want to organize, local communities at the pub or at the restaurants, but then you've also got the people who want to be digitally active, and what does that mean? Who have a large social media community as well. So I think those are just some of the differences that we're seeing. And what's interesting is we always say that Europe's learning from the US, and there are a lot of lessons that we can learn. But some of our first customers at NationBuilder were actually European. The Scottish National Party has been with us for many, many years and was one of the first customers we ever had. So it's interesting to see some of the new political parties in Europe actually paving the way, for what's possible soon.
This year we have the UK election.
I feel like the UK has an election every year.
The French, German. You've been involved in some of them. Elections taking place next year. What are we going to see different? So are we going to see more political parties throwing their volunteers to the streets, making use of digital as a innovative way to communicate instead of just repeating what their leaders say on the offline campaign? What sort of things we're going to see in 2018?
It's so hard, and it's so hard with technology because what I say today might be completely wrong in 3 months. But one of the things that I noticed when we were at the Conservative Party conference, and it was the same at the Labour Party conference, we're going to see more decentralization. I think the old way of doing things where the HQ and the party runs everything no longer works for a variety of reasons. I think globalization is one, the world has changed. I think local volunteers have access to tools and technology that they could never dreamed of 10, 5, 3 years ago. So tech has allowed people to be able to see things, I think, a little bit differently. So I think the decentralized model, and at the Conservative Party conference, you heard a lot of people say, I didn't get the right info, or I didn't get the right communications from HQ. I wanted something different. And I think allowing people to do things differently at a local level is going to be one of the huge differences that we see. So very much more of that decentralized leadership model. I think we're going to see more of. Data, I think we're still just it's like an iceberg. We're still just at the top of what data means. A lot of people are throwing out the word big data and talking about that. There's a bit, and then obviously there's the data overload and information overload. So I think people are going to start figuring out how they can get strategic about this and how they can think about data. And that means hiring data scientists, data analysts. That means working with companies who actually look at large data sets. It actually means understanding as a political party, what type of data do you have? What's the data that's going to be useful? So I think next year there's going to be a huge focus on data, but I want to say sort of more in a mature way in what that could potentially involve and look like. I also think that in Europe, and rightly so, I don't want to say we're scared of data, but we're taking our precautions. Obviously, data privacy, GDPR coming into play next year. So I think the data element is going to be a really interesting, but also a really tricky one. GDPR, as you know, is wanted to be a pan-European compliance when it comes to data privacy, but we're already seeing countries like Germany, like France, tweaking and changing it and making it their own nationally. So that's the biggest complexity of Europe, is that even though we want to do things at a pan-European level, every country has their own legal rules, especially when it comes to data. So I think that's going to be for us in Europe the hardest thing to try and think of, because when you think of voters who are abroad, what does that mean? Does the data compliance for French people who are living in the UK, does European rule or legislation apply? Is it UK rules and legislation? Is it French rules? I mean, so I think there's a lot more that we need to dive into at that level. So decentralization, data. This is a personal wish, but I just want us to be a little bit more mature when it comes to social media. I think people are a little bit tired of hearing about digital and social and how much we're spending on Facebook ads and Twitter ads. But I do think there's a way of looking at social media in a much more strategic way and understanding. And I think we have already understood that it's not your 18-year-old, millennials in a room tweeting. It's actually members of parliament, it's people who are presidents, So I think that's going to shift as well, and we're just going to get a little bit more mature when it comes to that. And then I also think micro donations is another one that I think I have a feeling we're starting to see more and more of it. Jeremy Corbyn did it in the UK, where membership fees went all the way down, and you could be a member by just giving £1, £2. So I think the access, micro donations tied with membership and how we're rethinking membership of a political party, I have a sense that that's shifting. The reason I say this is most of the conversations we have with political parties today, they're rethinking membership. What that looks like, what it means, what it entails, why do you want to become a member of a political party today? So those are just a few of the things. Who knows? None of those might come true.
and perhaps a more tricky question, which is, so beyond 2018, we were last week at a future election summit event in Ukraine, and we were talking about the future. We were talking about not 2018 or 2019, but even 2050, how technology was going to transform politics, how we deal with government, digital government, all those sort of stuff. So I wanted to ask you about that. Do you feel technology has this potential of transforming the way we interact with government, with our politicians, people we elect, how we vote, etc.?
I think undoubtedly. I think technology has changed and is present, I think, more or less in every aspect of our lives. I don't think I can think of one space of my life where technology hasn't had an impact. And, with that kind of impact, there's good and there's bad that comes with it. I think God knows where we're going to be in 5 years. When I look at how much we've changed in the last 2 or 3 years and how much we've evolved. I remember when we ended up working with, 7 French presidential candidates for the elections in France in 2016, 2017. Never in a million years would I have thought that France was going to be at the cusp of, adopting new kind of tech and doing so rapidly. But I think the two things for me that are going to be true, and these are sort of like big categories, I think tech is going to allow, or whether we like it or not, force us to be more transparent and more open in every regard in society. So the legislations that are passed, how rules are being made, how the decision-making process, I think all of that is going to be much more transparent than it ever has been. And I think it's going to allow for new types of leaders to come on board. I think the traditional sort of bipartisan model, although we don't really have that in Europe, but the traditional, you've got 2 or 3 big political parties ruling is no longer going to be a thing, because I think we saw it in the UK with the Women's Equality Party, we saw it with Jeremy Corbyn, we saw it with the SNP taking so many votes, we saw it with Emmanuel Macron in France, with Podemos. I mean, everywhere you look in Europe, there are more political parties and new political parties that weren't there, or didn't exist, 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 18 months ago. And I think that's a trend that we're seeing, is sort of this rise of the outsiders, that because technology is more accessible to many people today, the barrier to entry is so low. I think more and more people have that opportunity to create a new political party, a new movement, or step up and lead. And I think that is just going to become even more true. And so those are, for me, those 2 sort of big trends and buckets. And then from a very sort of tactical point of view, and I know I think might have chatted about this before, but it's chatbots. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of companies, and what is possible on Facebook and seeing what people can do is absolutely fascinating. And just, I think, thinking about how we're going to move away from newsletters and email being the main source of communication to maybe text messaging, to maybe chatbots. I think we just need to be open to that. I mean, I am still not sure how comfortable I am about having text messages from political parties, but I think we just need to be open that this is happening. So yeah.
We were talking especially about how artificial intelligence will come into play within the next few years with the use of digital research assistants, also chatbots, indeed. And one of the most amazing thing is virtual reality, augmented reality, and we saw that in India with Modi doing holograms, talking to different people at the same time, different locations. So I guess you guys will work with the people who are going to be implementing all these technologies first, and I'm glad that you are optimistic. You don't get this you don't always get this type of feeling, and I think on that note we can we can close the interview
this was fun.
For now on an optimistic note. And I would like just to thank you for your time.
This has been fun. I've never done a Facebook Live, so this was a first. This is cool.
And for the rest of them, you'll get this interview on the November newsletter, and then we'll have another guest next month, who is a professor from the LSE.
Fantastic. Can you tell us who it is? No, surprise.
Surprise.
Love it. Thank you, Sebastian. This was fun.
Thank you.